What's up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos. This time for Tuesday, January 11th. We are just flying through January. It actually feels like basically yesterday was the new year, and this has been going by way too fast for my liking of just another year of my life. But I am your host, Justin Bales, clearly having an existential crisis, not crisism. That's not even a word. I can't even speak at this point. We're with Spike. You take over. How you doing?
Not too bad. Got the booster shot today. Arm's starting to hurt a little, and time will tell if it gets worse or better.
Time does not need to tell. I can tell. It will get worse. Just had it. Not good. Hope you don't get sick at all. That would be ideal, but that arm is going to hurt.
Yeah.
We have I believe a 6-game slate. Relatively interesting, I guess would be a way to put it, but also iffy slate. I don't know about you. I know, you said beforehand on here, but it's not my favorite slate, just with kind of the news that we have. We have this weird kind of thing in Golden State where Clay is back, so he's taking minutes from other people, but he's not actually playing enough that you're going to be able to use him in fantasy. So it kind of takes out an entire situation that you can't use. We do have surprisingly little injury news. I mean, it's the NBA, so there's still quite a bit, but not nearly as crazy as it's been. But overall, do you like this slate, or is this kind of one that you're not overly keen on?
Right now it's like meh. I'm sure I'll like it more the more I kind of dive into it. But like you said, I mean, Golden State almost becomes unplayable at this point. Just as Clay's back, that usage is just so spread around, and yeah, I just early look there's not a lot I like, but hopefully that changes.
Yeah, if we're going to be honest, generally, when you have your first look at a slate, more often than not, it feels like you look at the slate and you're like, "Ew, this is kind of gross." And then as you just dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you start finding more things that you like, you're like, wait a minute, this is actually a pretty decent slate. I don't know if that happens this time. This slate actually, it's not bad in the fact that it has 6 games. It's just tough. I'll go with it. This is a tough slate, not necessarily a bad one. It's a tough one, but we'll quickly go over injury news. We do have some very key factors that are questionable tonight that will actually change the slate. But once we do that, break down the position by position and give you our favorite plays at each position. Before we get started on that, go ahead and give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. You can also subscribe to the channel. Leave any comments you have below. Spike and I will be in there throughout the day to give you our thoughts on them. Generally, we will not be able to offer every single player that we like on a slate. So if there's someone that we did not talk about that you are wondering about, drop their name in the comments below. We'll let you know what we think. You can also go to dfskarma.com where you can find all of our free content or pick up our core plays package. In that package, you get all of our premium content along with projections. You get our premium Discord and obviously our core plays. You can also go to chatdfs.com, get into our free Discord. There is a free section of the Discord versus the premium part. The premium one only comes with the core plays package. The free one, you can be in there all day, at all times if you want. It doesn't really matter. We do go over quite a bit of stuff in the free part. Plenty of knowledge and value in that alone. But then as we get closer to log, generally we shift over to premium, who gets first dibs on all of the coaches and everything. That's part of why you would want to be in the premium. All of this can be found in the description below. Just click the links of whatever you're looking for, and it will take you directly there. Moving to the injury news. Zayer Williams, Isaiah Roby, both out for Oklahoma City. Thomas Bryant, Anthony Gill, both out for Washington. You have Cam Johnson out once again for the Phoenix Suns. On the other side, we have questionable news with Scotty Barnes and Gary Trent both being questionable. For Minnesota, Patrick Beverley questionable. Not too much going on with New Orleans. Looks like Tomas Satoransky and Josh Hart are back in. For Golden State, you have Draymond Green out, then Otto Porter Jr. and Gary Payton, both questionable. On the opposite side, Steven Adams is questionable. Frank Jackson and Kelly Olynyk will continue to miss time. Bol Bol, who Detroit recently traded for, he is questionable tonight. Alex Caruso out once again for Chicago. And then for Denver, you have Will Barton out, which is pretty big news. On the other side, Luke Kennard, Justice Winslow, and Isaiah Hartenstein all out for the Los Angeles Clippers. That's it. And I mean, it's a decent amount of news, but when you think about how long it generally takes us to run through this injury news, that is a small amount, is it not?
Yeah, no, that wasn't bad at all.
So we can move on to position by position. Again, though, a lot of talking by me. So let's Spike start this off. Who are you looking at here at point guard?
I guess we'll start off right here at the top. Fred VanVleet, his price is kind of getting up there, 9,600. But I mean, with what he's been doing, it's pretty warranted. I'm not crazy in love with the matchup. The only thing I kind of like about it is Phoenix does give up a lot of threes. That's kind of his bread and butter shot right there. So, I mean, he's interesting there. I don't mind it at all. You go down a little bit. Chris Paul on the other side of that game is 7,700, and I think that's still too cheap for what he can do. I mean, what was it, two or 3 days ago? He put up a triple double. I think he was 7,300 on that slate. So, I mean, his price just isn't really moving for what he's been doing. So I really like that right there. You move down a little further. Reggie Jackson's price has finally come down to where I want to play him. 5,800 against the Nuggets. I think they're like top 5 and giving up fantasy points to point guards. So that's something I'm really interested in as well. If you want to go to the other side of that game, right below him is Monty Morris for 4,700. And the Clippers are right there next to the Nuggets and giving up points to the point guards as well. And I guess you could also throw in Campazzo there too. But more or less, that's what I'm looking at. You could interest me in taking a shot on like Lonzo Ball against Detroit. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I more or less agree with what you're saying. I think that for me, Fred VanVleet has to be one of the top options on the entire slate. So Phoenix isn't necessarily an elite matchup in terms of fantasy points allowed. They actually aren't good against point guards. But the specific thing here is that Phoenix allows the 4th most points per game to point guards. And if you're using Fred VanVleet, you're basically, not that he can't do anything else. Obviously, he just triple-doubled. But you're really relying on his scoring, and you're hoping that he drops, 30-plus real-life points in a game. So when you use something like that for VanVleet, you want him against a team like Toronto that does give up a lot of threes, which is essentially what he does. And they give up a lot of points to the point guard. Moving down, though, I think you basically nailed it. There's no one that really sticks out all that much. I think if Patrick Beverley's back, he makes a really good option at only 5,300. I think you have the Denver guys with Will Barton out. I would assume that Campazzo probably plays a lot more point guard, and then Monty Morris shifts over to shooting guard. And by that, it's more of a technicality. They're basically just both playing guards because Jokic plays with the ball in his hands so much that you don't really necessarily need them as a true point guard. Between the two, though, I would assume that Campazzo probably does more ball handling. And 4,600, 4,700, they're both just way too cheap. I guess, honestly, if you're moving down and looking for the cheap guys, Bones Heinlein's only 3,300 without Will Barton. My assumption is that his minutes probably go back up to around 20. And, we've kind of seen him drop these really crazy fantasy point games in the limited minutes. I don't like it all that much, but, there's not necessarily a ton here that I really, really want to play at point guard. So he is a guy that I guess I would at least consider as a GPP dart. That's about it, though, honestly. It's not a great position. I think there's some very clear spots that you want to attack. If you can get someone like Fred VanVleet in your lineup, then obviously the Denver guys, they kind of sit above everyone else for me. And I don't necessarily think anyone's all that close at the moment. But we can move to shooting guard where VanVleet is also eligible. But Spike, who are you looking at here for shooting guard?
Real quick, do you think Campazzo might draw the start?
I don't necessarily know, but I won't be overly shocked if he does, because realistically, who else would you expect? I guess Austin Rivers, maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking it was between them two, but either way, I still like Campazzo better than Rivers, even with that start. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
was
agree
just
with that, because
take on it.
they can't take one of the forwards and play them at two guard. It's just
Right.
that wouldn't happen. I guess if Rodney Magruder, like they just traded Ball for him, if he's active and can play, maybe, but it would be weird for him to start over someone like Rivers, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we're just gonna have to see. My guess would be Campazzo either starts, or if he doesn't, I think it's probably pretty clear Rivers.
Yeah. All right. Yep. Just curious. That's all. All right. I guess start shooting guard off. We'll start there at the top. Bradley Beal gets a really good matchup against the Thunder. 9,500. It's not too bad. The Thunder give up a lot of points to the shooting guards. I think their defense is like in the top 5 worst for giving up points to shooting guards. And obviously, Beal can do a lot more than just shoot. He can get assists, the occasional steal. So you could interest me there. Other than that, excuse me. My next guy is going way down, and we were just talking about him. But I think if you want in large field tournaments, you can give Klay Thompson a shot. He's only 6K. I guess you're gonna have to see. I would like to see something on his minutes, but it's a pretty good matchup without Dylan Brooks there against the Grizzlies. So I'd be willing to take a shot on that. Going to the other side of that game, Desmond Bane is only 6,500. Might seem like a lot, but without Dylan Brooks, he's kind of forced into bigger minutes. Golden State isn't really a defense you really like to attack, but if you are, I'd prefer to attack it outside rather than inside. So that's something that interests me as well. Other than that, I mean, Brandon Ingram could have a bounce back game against the Timberwolves. He's priced about right, 8,200, but he really had a bad game his last game. So I mean, I'm kind of looking for a bounce back game there. And then if you want, you can go all the way down. I guess this is more dependent on if he starts. But Zayer Williams for Memphis actually quietly had a pretty good game, at least for his price tag. And it didn't really move much. It's at 3,400, but that's strictly if he starts. And that's pretty much about it. I guess you could go back to a bowl again, and Kobe White's semi-interesting at 5,600. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, you outlined it extremely well. I think you basically talked about most guys that I would be interested in. I think that Anthony Edwards is a little bit too cheap, not necessarily. I mean, it is a good matchup against New Orleans, but it wouldn't be like a matchup where I'm like, oh, absolutely need to attack this. It's just that 7,900 is just a little too cheap for how well he's playing right now. So on top of the guys that you said there, I do think that he's viable. I also think that D'Angelo Russell will be in play if Patrick Beverley's out. Desmond Bane, agree, way too cheap. His minutes haven't even been that big recently, and he's dropping 40-plus points. Obviously, no Dylan Brooks. Someone else has to take over the second spot in the offense with John Morant clearly leading it. But that is going to be Desmond Bane most likely, and his shot can fall very well. Good three-point shooter, and he can add other peripherals as well on it. There's just not that much to love. Like, you can take these dart throws, DeAnthony Melton, any given night, Melton can go for 30 fantasy points in 20 minutes. It's something that happens. It's tough to project. I wouldn't necessarily project it against Golden State, but it could definitely happen. So if you want to take some type of dart throw like that, I think that he's one of the better options in terms of pure upside on this type of a slate, because there's just not that much to love. But outside of that, you have Austin Rivers, who we kind of talked about. he should be seeing bigger minutes and could potentially draw the start. I think he scored almost 40 fantasy points in 30 plus minutes in his last game. So kind of there already. And then I do think that you outlined the clear, real salary relief option in Zayer Williams. I actually think that I could be wrong on this, and I might just be blanking on it, but I could have swore that he started his last game 4 for 4 from the field, and then he just shot 0 of 5 for the rest of the game. But I was pretty sure that he started 4 for 4 from the field, and I was thinking that at 3K, Zaire Williams was going to absolutely break the slate. Then obviously he only scored 18 fantasy points, which not great, not bad for 3,000, but he's only 3,400 at this point, and very clearly he can outscore that quite a bit. So I do think that he is a very solid side relief option if you really need to go near the bottom there. That about does it for shooting guard. We can move on to small forward, where here's your man that maybe you haven't listed at power forward. I guess we'll see. Who do you like as small forward here?
I mean, it's another position I really don't like. I don't.
We could just say that for literally every position. Oh,
Yeah,
this one isn't great.
more or less. Zach LaVine at the top isn't terrible. I won't talk you off of him. He's got a good matchup against Detroit. My biggest worry in this game is there is some blowout potential with Detroit on a back-to-back, even though they just beat the Jazz, which I still am trying to wrap my head around. But I mean, you could interest me in him. And then this next guy, Kyle Kuzma, his price just keeps going up, but he just keeps outperforming it night after night. It doesn't matter if Dinwiddie's back or anything. He's just more or less taking over that offense right behind Beal, and it's just been wild to just even watch him play. So, I mean, that's more of a GPP play because he could come back down to earth at any minute, any game, I guess you could say. But I'd be more than willing to take a shot there. You go down a little bit more. Marcus Morris at 6,700 against the Nuggets. That's still a smidge cheap, I think, for how he's been playing. Just been shooting very well. His peripheral stats are pretty nice too. So that's something that could interest me for sure. And I really hate to say this play, but he did well last game, and there's no Dylan Brooks. So Kyle Anderson at 5K isn't a terrible play. I don't know if I'll go there, but it's not bad. You go down a little bit more. Aaron Gordon at 4,900 with no Will Bartone, I think, is a little too cheap for his pure upside. I mean, I really missed the days when he was in Orlando and just having ceiling games left and right. And I think with someone like Barton out, we could potentially see that happen. Again, he's just too cheap either way. All he needs is 25, 26 fantasy points to pay off that tag, and I don't think that's very unrealistic at all. You go down even further, my guy, John Conchar.
I knew that was coming. I was waiting on it.
It's really not a good matchup for him. I mean, Golden State, again, not a team you'd like to attack, but he's going to be seeing minutes with Dylan Brooks out. And he actually, last game, he got subbed in before Melton did. I remember seeing that. So that's got to stand for something right there. And if this guy's shot is falling, he gets steals, he gets rebounds and assists too. He can pretty much contribute in all 5 categories. So I mean, if he's running hot, they like to play him a little longer than normal. And I mean, let's be honest, he's only 3,500. It's not going to take a lot to pay off that tag, and that could really open up some extra salary to get some more expensive guys. But that's probably about it for small forward for me.
Yeah, I think you outlined that position well as well. Very similar spots. I'll add a few guys here. One, Sadiq Bey. People Chicago is a very good defense, so don't get me wrong on this end, but Chicago is not a good defense against power forwards. It's one position that they've struggled with for the majority of the season. And a lot of these times you have these really good defenses that they do have a hole. The Utah Jazz are really bad against shooting guards. And obviously last night we saw Cade Cunningham just go crazy. It was his best game as a pro, I believe. Went nuts against them. And you can always take advantage of these really good defenses, or at least perceived really good defenses that do have holes. And that particular matchup, you can definitely take advantage of, especially when it's a guy like Saddiq Bey, who shots are generally going to be there for him without Jeremy Grant. They're just trying to develop him, essentially. So the offense is running through him. It's running through Cunningham, that type of a thing. So plenty of upside there. I don't necessarily think that he should be using him in cash games. But I do think for tournaments, that's fine. Josh Giddey is down to only 6,900 at this point. Obviously loses a bit of value when Oklahoma City's healthy, but you still have the triple-double potential. You still have very solid peripheral stats. I believe he had 4 steals a few games ago. And then not that he's necessarily the most dominant scorer whatsoever, but he can get you, 15 to 20 real-life points. And when you kind of look at what he does in terms of rebounds, assists, and potentially steals, that's more than enough for only 7,000. Moving down quickly, I actually do not like this guy, but isn't it crazy how insanely fast Andrew Wiggins lost his role in that offense with Klay Thompson back?
Yeah, it's wild. It's honestly wild how fast everyone lost their role. It's just wild. Like I said at the beginning, it makes all of them nearly unplayable unless there's a couple big injuries in that starting line.
Yeah, it's crazy, honestly. But right below him, Josh Hart, another versatile small forward that I feel like is in play. He can score better than Giddey at this point, but triple double threat for New Orleans. He's back, should be back to full minutes. It's not like he missed a ton of time. And then just one more guy that I'll throw in here that I don't necessarily want to, but I feel like it's at least reasonable. Kel Bridges, with Cam Johnson out, they need another scorer. Bridges had 11 shot attempts. That's kind of where he sits around, but he should get between 10 and 15 tonight. If his shot's falling a little bit better, he scored 30 plus in 2 of his last 3, still only 5,300. And, maybe he gets a few extra 3-pointers off because Cam Johnson's out. But 5,300 is a little bit cheap, especially for this type of a slate. So I do think that he's at least viable. At power forward, we have a lot of the same guys up top, Kyle Kuzma, Saddiq Bey. Then other guys up at the top are out, Draymond Green, Kawhi Leonard. The only guy really up there that we didn't talk about is DeMar DeRozan, and always seems a little overpriced because there's so many mouths to feed in Chicago, right? But the upside's there if DeRozan's the guy that's getting fed. It just so happens that if he's not, then you're going to take a loss on the night, right?
So yeah, this is the biggest problem I have with the Bulls is they have so many stars on their team that 2, maybe 3 of them can go off, but more times than not, it's one and a secondary one that's doing almost as good. Levine, Ball, Vooch, DeRozan. I mean, you can kind of take a dart on any of them and hope that they get that ceiling game. But I do like DeRozan here. I don't think they have anyone that's really going to guard him. Stewart's going to have his hands full with Vuk. So, yeah, I mean, you could interest me at that. I mean, he should probably come in relatively low owned, I'm guessing.
DeRozan?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not a guy that ever gets ownership, actually, when you think back on playing him. I'll play him in really good matchups because he can score so well. And what they do, I don't know if you've watched the Bulls, but what they do is they stagger their rotation. So they all start, and then after, 5 minutes about, maybe 6, DeRozan gets pulled, and he gets pulled for a few minutes. And then when 2 minutes are left in the half, maybe 3 minutes, it kind of depends on what they're working with. But essentially everyone else kind of gets taken out. Maybe they'll leave in, one guy. It's usually not Vucevic. Maybe I think Zach LaVine occasionally they'll leave in. And then they throw DeRozan back in, and the offense runs through DeRozan essentially completely. And that's when he does all of his scoring. So like when you play DeRozan, you always start out poorly. It's almost always the little snowflake on DraftKings in the first few minutes because one, he just doesn't do anything, or he does stuff, but he doesn't do all that much while everyone else is there. And then he gets pulled, so he's actually not even on the court. But then when you watch him in between the quarters, because he's literally the only starter on the court and the offense, they just give him the ball and he does whatever he wants. All of a sudden, then he scores all these points. He catches his fire. It's amazing. And then obviously, DeRozan's a lot of the times the go-to in the fourth quarter, which you would think Zach LaVine would have that role. But with how many times DeRozan has just hit these ridiculous three-pointers, I guess you just got to keep going with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, he hit 2, I think, almost back-to-back nights, like a week or 2 ago. It was wild,
Yeah, I actually bet his over on points on both of those, and both three-pointers to win the game also hit the specific over. He needed that 3 to hit the over, and he did it on both. It was the craziest
That's
2 nights
wild.
of my life.
How about that for a sweat?
Right? Yeah. And both times he had scored like, I don't know. The over was at like 27 points or something. And both times he had scored like 15, 18 points or something in the first 3 quarters. So you're just like, I'm not even going to come close to cashing this. And then he just takes over with like 5 minutes left and consistently scores. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Agreed.
Who else do you have down a bit farther at power forward here?
Oh, I got one guy you're gonna love, but Draymond Green is out. I don't know if you said that or not. I mean,
yeah,
that really doesn't matter to me. It doesn't really open up a lot. I mean, I guess you could take a shot, and I guess this would have been more of a small forward. I guess you could take a shot on Otto Porter if he plays. He's questionable right now, but yeah, that really doesn't do much. There's really not. There's really not a lot to like here. Jaren Jackson is up at 7,100. It's pretty high. I mean, as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, he can definitely hit value there. But I just don't see that happening. You go down a little further. Herbert Jones is 5,100 against the Timberwolves. I don't mind that at all. He's really cheap. I'm pretty sure on FanDuel he's somewhere up in the 6K range, which is wild. But on DK, I'm more than happy to play him at that price. And this guy right here, you would think with Isaiah Stewart back that this dude would not be getting minutes, but Trey Lyles just continues. He just continues to keep getting minutes in the high 20s to almost 25 to 30 minutes a game. The last 2 or 3 games, even with Stewart back. And he's doing he's scoring, he's getting rebounds. There's a couple steals in there. And this dude's going to get some blowout run if it comes to that. So, I mean, as long as he continues to see these minutes, and I don't see why he doesn't right now, especially with Jeremy Grant still sidelined. I mean, you're not going to sit here and tell me that Bull is going to come and take his minutes away. So
I hope he does.
I'm really interested in him for 4,900 for sure. The next one is just way too cheap. He's just coming back, so I guess that's why. But Jay Crowder at 3,900 is a crime. You were talking about Kel Bridges earlier. It's a great play, but without Cam Johnson, that's essentially Jay Crowder's backup. So he's gonna be taking over some of his minutes. And at 3,900, I mean, if Crowder's 3-shot is falling, he could really pay that off fast. I mean, he can put up points fast when his game is going on. So that's more or less where I'm looking at for power forward.
Yeah, I think you outlined a lot of good options. I'll add a few here just real quickly before we do. I just want to say that the reason that Herbert Jones is so much more expensive on FanDuel is because they give the 3 points for the blocks and steals, and that dude is just insane with his defensive stats. It's crazy. I don't know if there's anyone better at getting blocks and steals than Herbert Jones. And rookie, he's only going to get better at it, honestly. So pretty crazy there. But 6,200 is getting extremely pricey. Jared Vanderbilt, he's starting. He obviously has always been a really good per minute option. Then once he got inserted into the starting lineup, obviously his per minutes fell a little bit because he's playing next to Anthony Edwards. He's playing next to Karl Anthony Towns. He's not getting all the shots. Very clearly, all of that makes sense. Elite rebounder, though. In his last 2 games, he has 19, 16. He had 13 before that, 9, 12. Like, you can just consistently go down. And when he gets 30 plus minutes, he gets double-digit rebounds. It's kind of how Jared Vanderbilt works. Can add assists. He scored 21 points in his last game. He can add blocks and steals. A lot of upside there. The problem, though, is that he just doesn't generally have this massive role. So if he happens to not get a few rebounds, if Karl Anthony Towns is taking them, anyone else really, he's not going to consistently drop the 21 points. That's just not going to happen. When you look at his point totals before that, he did hit 11 against Oklahoma City, which, big double there as well. But before that, 5, 8, 3, 5, 6, 4, 6. He's just not an elite scorer. That's not what he does. He's not going to go create his own shots or anything. But at 6,200 on this type of a slate, I do think he comes with some value. You can go down a little bit more. Nicholas Batum returned, I believe, a few games ago, and he kind of saw limited minutes for a little bit. Then last game he played 30. I'd anticipate he gets around that once again. 29 fantasy points in that game. He's actually performed pretty well throughout the season, specifically for a $4,300 price tag if he does get the 30 minutes. So I do think that that's way too cheap. I agree with you on Jay Crowder. That's kind of an obvious cheap option, in my opinion, just because, his minutes are going to keep going up. And he's basically, I don't want to say a lock to at least 5x, but for his price tag, it would be weird I guess I would be shocked if he doesn't 5x. And then for 3,300, you have Derek Jones Jr., 24 minutes in his last game. Would assume he gets 20 to 25 again. Obviously, we know he can score, 20 to 25 fantasy points in that amount of time. And he's only 3,300. So just a little bit too cheap there. But I do think that he's kind of riskier than someone like Crowder because I don't think his minutes are nearly as safe.
Yeah.
We can move to center where obviously starting with Nikola Jokic, he scored almost 75 in his only game against the Clippers this season. Clippers very clearly do not have anyone that's going to slow him down. 12,000 is not nearly expensive enough. He was up near 13 a few games ago. Comes with 90 fantasy point upside, and you just don't ever see that. So Jokic, especially with Will Barton out now too, probably arguably the top play on the slate. I don't know if you feel differently, but go ahead and just break down center for us here.
Yeah, I mean, first things first, if you know me, that is a lock for me. That is a lock.
Yep.
Joker is a lock. I mean, there's a lot of good plays at center. It could be a double spend up night. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns gets a pretty good matchup against the Pelicans. He's 10K. I mean, I think that's priced appropriately. I'd much rather take a shot on Valanciunas at 8,500 against Towns because Towns just really doesn't play a lot of defense. And Jonas' price is finally somewhere where I want to touch it. He was flirting around that 91, 92 range for a while, and I think that's just a little too much for him. But 8,500 seems right. I mean, I feel like this is a really good spot for him. Other than that, I mean, you could interest me in Nikola Vucevic too. He's only 9K, and like I was just saying earlier, it's just a matter of which one or two of these Bulls guys go off. But I don't see Isaiah Stewart stopping him. He can shoot the 3 ball too. He can contributes with blocks and steals as well. So he's just all around great player. Other than that, I mean, I really didn't see a lot that I liked. I guess you could take a shot if you trust his minutes on Chris Boucher for for Toronto. He's got a pretty good matchup too. I don't see how Steven Adams is going to come back this soon. He's questionable right now. I personally don't see him playing, and if that's the case, you can take a shot on Brandon Clark. He's kind of getting up there in price too at 5,100. But if he gets the minutes, and all the stars align, like he could really smash that tag. And it's kind of, you really get a hit or miss game with him. So it's just about nailing him on the right slate.
Yeah. I agree. You basically want to spend up. I feel like any of the top, 5 options, Jonas Valanciunas and higher, all make really good options. You didn't really say Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
And I don't like Pascal Siakam's matchup. I don't usually attack centers against Phoenix, but when you kind of think about Siakam and the quote unquote center aspect to him, a center like DeAndre Ayton really isn't going to be that big of a problem for him. He can just stand out at the 3-point. The offense runs through him a lot. He's super patient in the paint because he's not necessarily always looking for his own shot. He's more looking to pass. It's not a good matchup by any means because Ayton is a really good defensive center, but it's also not that bad of a matchup because you're not going to have a traditional center really guard what Siakam does. So if you watch their game against New Orleans, the majority of the game, Jonas Valanciunas didn't even actually guard Siakam. They kind of threw someone else out over on him and then had Valanciunas guard someone like Spy, who really wasn't going to do all that much anyway. And then they kind of, crashed if he had somewhat of an open 3 or anything, and they just let Valanciunas kind of stand in the paint a little bit more. Whether Phoenix does that or not, I don't necessarily know. But when you kind of look at what Siakam can do, triple-double upside, he can come with plenty of scoring potential. I don't know, 60-plus fantasy point upside there, and he's only 9,200. So I do think that the matchup's bad. The matchup's going to keep his ownership super low. The price tag on someone like Siakam, who people still don't necessarily, I think, realize how good he is, that's going to keep his price tag or his ownership low as well. So I do think that Siakam's a very sneaky play. I think he's super risky because of the matchup, but I do think he is sneaky. Outside of that, you can take your shot on someone like Kevin Looney. He did play 29 minutes with Draymond Green out last game. I would assume he plays around 30 again. And if he does get 30, he is too cheap. It's just kind of questionable as to whether they really are going to give him that many minutes. Even with Draymond Green out earlier in the season, they didn't really lock him into around 30 or anything. Montrezl Harrell, if you trust him getting minutes returning, I don't necessarily, because this is his first game back, and we've seen a lot of people come back from the COVID protocols, and they've only played 15 to 20 minutes. Outside of that, though, I don't think there's anyone cheaper that I really want. Like a Vika Zubac, I guess, at 5,100 is a little too cheap, and they're going to need his size against Jokic, but I don't know. This feels like a spend up or a double spend up at center night to me, doesn't it?
It really does. I could easily see spending up on 2 centers again. It's kind of been my in my builds the last week or so. So I don't see why it should stop. But yeah, like you said, Joker put up 73.5 the last time he played them, and I don't see how he doesn't do that again. The only way he doesn't is if they're blowing him out in the third quarter. He gets 0 fourth quarter run. And even then, he's probably the reason that they're getting blown out, especially with no Bartone. So yeah, it's
think about that first. You just said you don't see, outside of a blowout, you don't see how Joker doesn't drop 75 fantasy points again.
He still could, even with only three.
Yeah, no, I agree that's in the realm of possibilities, but we shouldn't expect it.
No. I personally thought when they played the Thunder the other night, I didn't think it was going to be that close. I didn't expect it to be a blowout, but I didn't expect them to keep it that close.
No, I agree with that. That was such a bad game by Joker.
Yeah. So
anything else from him, and they really do blow him out because he shot 8 of 21 or something.
Yeah. He had, even in a down game for him, he put up what 56.5 fantasy points. So I mean,
that's the crazy thing. He has a bad game and he's dropping 50 fantasy points for you. He has a good game, he's dropping 80. So the risk is well worth it at a 12K price tag.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he shot 8 for 21, one from 3 from the 3-point line. I mean, that's like a floor game. That's a floor game, and a floor game at 55 points is just sign me up every single time.
Yep. No, I'm on board with you, but that's all we have for you guys for this episode of our podcast. Again, if you enjoy it, go ahead and drop a thumbs up for us. You can also subscribe to the channel or ask any questions that you have in the comments. We'll be back tomorrow night for Wednesdays, or we'll be back for tomorrow's slate. I got confused because we record these the night before. We'll be back for tomorrow, the Wednesday slate, which should be bigger and better than this slate. But until then, good luck tonight. Hopefully everyone watching this hits big.